Sabu, Palaksa, Salmali, Kusha, Kurochuna, Kuroch, Kurochuna, no, Kurochuncha, Saka, Pushkara. Each island is twice as large as the one preceding it, and each is surrounded by a liquid substance, beyond which is the next island. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The ocean in each planetary system has a different type of liquid. How they are situated is explained in the next verse. And the next verse says, the seven oceans respectively contain salt water, sugarcane juice. Oh, that's nice. Liquor. That's not so nice. Clarified butter, milk, emulsified yogurt, and sweet drinking water. All the islands are completely surrounded by these oceans, and each ocean is equal in breadth to the island it surrounds. Maharaj Purvata, the husband and queen, Varhismati, gave sovereignty over these islands to his respective sons, namely Agnidra, Idmajiva, Yajnayabahu, Hiranyarita, Krita Prista, Medatiti, and Viti Hotra. Thus they all became kings by the order of their father. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It is to be understood that all the dvipas or islands are surrounded by different types of oceans, and it is said herein that the breadth of each ocean is the same as that of the island it surrounds. The length of the oceans, however, cannot equal the length of the islands. According to Raghava Acharya, the breadth of the first island is 1,000 yojanas. One yojana equals 8 miles, and therefore the breadth of the first island is calculated to be 800,000 miles. The water surrounding it must have the same breadth, but its length must be different. Text 34. King Priyavrat then gave his daughter, Urjasvati, in marriage to Sukracharya, who begot in her a daughter named Devayani. Okay. Text 35. My dear king, my dear king, a devotee who has taken shelter of the dust from the lotus feet of the Lord can transcend the influence of the six material whips, namely
Material waves.
material whips.
Oh, okay. Here it says waves.
Here it says whips, WHIPS.
Mhm.
Namely hunger, thirst, lamentation, illusion, old age, and death. And he can conquer the mind and five senses. However, this is not very wonderful for a pure devotee of the Lord because even a person beyond the jurisdiction of the four castes, in other words, an untouchable, is immediately relieved of bondage to material existence if he utters the holy name of the Lord even once. Oh, that's wonderful. Purport. by Srila Prabhupada. Sukadev Goswami was speaking to Maharaj Pariksit about the activities of King Priyavrata. And since the king might have had doubts about these wonderful, uncommon activities, Sukadev Goswami reassured him. My dear king, he said, don't be doubtful about the wonderful activities of Priyavrata. For a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, everything is possible because the Lord is also known as Urukrama. Urukrama is a name for Lord Vamanadeva, who performed the wonderful act of occupying the three worlds with three footsteps. Lord Vamanadeva requested three pieces of land from Maharaj Bali. When Maharaj Bali agreed to grant them, the Lord immediately covered the entire world with two steps. And for his third step, he placed his foot upon Bali Maharaj's head. Sri Jayadev Goswami says, Chalayasi Vikramane Balim Adbhutavamana Pada Naka Niragyanita Jana Bhavana Derishavadrita Vamana Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare. All glories to Lord Keshava, who assumed the form of a dwarf. O Lord of the universe, who takes away everything inauspicious for the devotees. O wonderful Vamanadeva, you tricked the great demon Bali Maharaja by your steps. The water that touched the nails of your lotus feet when you pierced through the covering of the universe purifies all living entities in the form of the river Ganges. Since the Supreme Lord is all powerful, he can do things that seem wonderful for a common man. Similarly, a devotee who has taken shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord can also do wonderful things, unimaginable to a common man, by the grace of the dust of those lotus feet. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore teaches us to take shelter of the Lord's lotus feet. Ainam datanuja kinkaram patitam mam vishame bhavam buddho. Kripaya tava pada pankaja stita dulisadrisam vichintaya. O son of Maharaj, Nanda Maharaj, I am your eternal servant, yet somehow or other I have fallen into the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms of your lotus feet. Lord Chaitanya teaches us to come in touch with the dust of the Lord's lotus feet, for then there will undoubtedly be all success. Then there will undoubtedly be all success. Because of the material body, every living entity in material existence is always disturbed by sadguna, six whips: hunger, thirst, lamentation, illusion, invalidity, and death. Furthermore, another sadguna, another sadguna are the mind and five invalidity and death. Furthermore, another sadguna are the mind and the five sense organs, not to speak of a sanctified devotee, even a chandala, an outcast who is untouchable, is immediately freed from material bondage if he utters the holy name of the Lord even once. Sometimes caste brahmanas argue that unless one changes his body, he cannot be accepted as a brahmana, for since the present body is obtained as a result of past actions. One who has in the past acted as a Brahmana takes birth in a Brahmana family. Therefore, he contends. Therefore, they contend without such a Brahminical body. One cannot be accepted as a Brahmana. Herein it is said, however, that even Vidura, Vigata, a Chandala, a fifth class untouchable, is freed if he utters the holy name even once. Being freed means that he immediately changes his body. Sanatana Goswami confirms this. Yata kanchanatam yati kamsyam rasa vidanata tata diksha vidanena dvijatvam jayate rinam. When a person, even though a chandala, is initiated by a pure devotee into chanting the holy name of the Lord, his body changes as he follows the instructions of the spiritual master. Although one cannot see how his body has changed, we must accept, on the grounds of the authoritative statements of the Shastras, that he changes his body. This is to be understood without argument. This verse clearly says, Sa Jahati Bandam. He gives up his material bondage. The body is a symbolic representation of material bondage, according to one's karma. Although sometimes we cannot see the gross body changing, chanting the holy name of the Supreme Lord immediately changes the subtle body, and because the subtle body changes, the living entity is immediately freed from material bondage. After all, changes of the gross body are conducted by the subtle body. After the destruction of the gross body, the subtle body takes the living entity away. Takes the living entity from his present gross body to another. In the subtle body, the mind is predominant, and therefore, if one's mind is always absorbed in remembering the activities of the lotus feet of the Lord, he is to be understood to have already changed his present body and become purified. Therefore, it is irrefutable that the Chandala or any fallen or low-born person can become a Brahmana simply by the method of bona fide initiation. Oh, it's nice. Text 36. While enjoying his material opulences with full strength and influence, Maharaj Priyavrata once began to consider that although he had fully surrendered to the great saint Narada and was actually on the path of Krishna consciousness, he had somehow become again entangled in material activities. Thus his mind now became restless, and he began to speak in a spirit of renunciation. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In Srimad Bhagavatam 1.5.17, it is said, Tekpasva dharmam charanam bhujam harir, bhajan apakvo ta patet tato yadi. Yetra kva vabadram abud amusya kim, ko varta aptu bhajatan swadharmata. One who has forsaken his material occupations to engage in the devotional service of the Lord may sometimes fall down while in an immature stage. Yet, there is no danger of his being unsuccessful. On the other hand, a non-devotee though fully engaged in occupational duties, does not gain anything. If one somehow or other comes to the shelter of a great Vaishnava, takes to Krishna consciousness because of sentiment or realization, but in course of time falls down because of immature understanding, he is not actually fallen. For his having engaged in Krishna consciousness is a permanent asset. That's the mercy of the Lord. If one falls down, having engaged in Krishna consciousness is a, uh, I'm sorry, if one falls down, therefore, his progress might be checked for a certain time, but it will again become manifest at an opportune moment. Although Priyavrata Maharaja was serving according to the instructions of Narada Muni, meant for going back home, back to Godhead, he returned to material affairs at the request of his father. In due course of time, however, his consciousness for serving Krishna reawakened by the grace of his spiritual master, Narada. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 6.41, Suchinam Shimatam Gehe Yoga Vrasto Vijayate. One who falls down from the process of bhakti yoga, let's see, one second. Again, uh, offered, uh, one who falls down from the process of bhakti yoga is again offered the opulence of the demigods. And after enjoying such material opulence, he is given a chance to take birth in a noble family of a pure Brahmana or in a rich family to be given the chance to revive his Krishna consciousness. This actually happened in the life of Priyavrata. He is most glorious. He is most glorious. He is a most glorious example of this truth. In due course of time, he no longer wanted to enjoy his material opulences and his wife, kingdom, and sons. Instead, he wanted to renounce them all. Therefore, after having described the material opulences of Maharaj Priyavrata, Sukadeva Goswami in this verse describes his tendency for renunciation. The words Devarsi Charanan Nusayana indicate that Maharaja Priyavrata, following all the devotional processes and regulative principles under his direction. Okay. The words Devarsi Charanan Nusayana indicate that Maharaja Priyavrata, having fully surrendered to the great sage Devarsi Narada, was strictly following all the devotional processes and regulative principles under his direction. In regard to strictly following the regulative principles, Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur says, Dandavat pranamas tan anupatita, by immediately offering obeisances or dandavat unto the Supreme Master and by strictly following his directions, the student becomes advanced. Maharaj Priyavrata was doing all these things regularly. As long as one is in the material nature, the or guna visarga, it is not that Maharaj Priyavrata was freed from material influence because he possessed all material opulences in this material world. Both the very poor man and the very rich man are under the material influences. For both wealth and poverty are creations of the modes of material nature. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 3.27, Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasa. According to the modes of material nature, we acquire the material nature we require. The material nature gives us facility for material enjoyment. The king thus began criticizing himself. Alas, how condemned I have become! Because of my sense gratification, I have now fallen into material enjoyment, which is exactly like a covered well. I have had enough. I am not going to enjoy anymore. Just see how I have become like a dancing monkey in the hands of my wife. Because of this, I am condemned. Haribo. Purport. How condemned is the advancement of material knowledge can be understood from the behavior of Maharaj Priyavrata. He performed such wonderful acts as creating another sun, which shined during the night, and creating a chariot so great that its wheels formed vast oceans. These activities are so great that modern scientists cannot even imagine how such things can be done. Maharaj Priyavrata acted very wonderfully in the material field of activities, but because he was dealing in sense gratification, ruling his kingdom and dancing to the indications of his sense gratification, ruling his kingdom and dancing to the indications of his beautiful wife, he personally condemned himself. When we think about this example of Maharaj Priyavrata, we can just consider how degraded is the modern civilization of materialistic advancement. Modern so called scientists and other materialists are very satisfied because they can construct great bridges, roads, and machines. But such activities are nothing comparable to those of Maharaja Priyavata. If Maharaj Priyavata could condemn himself in spite of his wonderful activities, how condemned we are in our so-called advancement of material civilization. We can conclude that such advancement has nothing to do with the problems of the living entity entangled within this material world. Unfortunately, modern man does not understand his entanglement and how condemned he is, nor does he know what kind of body he is going to have in the next life. From a spiritual point of view, a great kingdom, beautiful wife, and wonderful material activities are all impediments to spiritual advancement.
Mm.
Maharaja Priyavrata had served the great sage Narada sincerely. Therefore, even though he had accepted material opulences, he could not be deviated from his own task. He again became Krishna conscious. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Nahavi Krama Nasoti Nas Nasosti Pratyabhaya Navidyate Swapam Apiyasiddharma Chayati Matopayat. In devotional service, there is no loss or diminution, and even a small service rendered in devotional service is sufficient to save one from the greatest danger. What is the greatest danger? Is to go back to the animal world after being engaged in devotional service as a human being. Bhagavad Gita 2.40. Such renunciation as Priyavrata, Priyavrata's is possible only by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Generally, when people are powerful or when they have a beautiful wife, a beautiful home, and material popularity, they become more and more entangled. Priyavrata Maharaja, however, having been completely trained by the great sage Narada, revived his Krishna consciousness in spite of all impediments. Text 38. By the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Maharaj Priyavrata reawakened to his senses. He divided all his earthly possessions among his obedient sons. He gave up everything, including his wife, with whom he had enjoyed so much sense gratification, and his great and opulent kingdom, and he completely renounced all attachment. His heart, having been cleansed, became a place of pastimes for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, he was able to return to the path of Krishna consciousness, spiritual life, and resume the position he had attained by the grace of the great saint Narada. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. As enunciated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his Sikshastaka, Shaitadarpana Marjanam, Baba Mahadevagni Nirvapanam. As soon as one's heart is cleansed, the blazing fire of material existence is immediately extinguished. Our hearts are meant for the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of God. This means that one should be fully Krishna conscious, thinking of Krishna as he himself advises. Man mana bhava maklu, mad yajiv tam, yan mad yajiv mam namaskuru. This should be our only business. One whose heart is not clean cannot think of the transcendental pastimes of the Supreme Lord. But if one can once again place the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his heart, he very easily becomes qualified to renounce material attachment. Mayavadi philosophers and Gyanis try to give up this material world simply by saying Brahma Satyam Jagam Mitya. In other words, Brahma is the truth, and the uh, but if one can once again place the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his heart, he very easily becomes qualified to renounce material attachment. Mayavadi philosophers, yogis, and jnanis tried to give up this material world simply by saying Brahma Satyam Jagan Mitya. This world is false. There is no use of it. Let us take to Brahman. Such theoretical knowledge will not help us. If we believe that Brahman is the real truth, we have to place within our hearts the lotus feet of Sri Krishna, as Maharaja Ambarisha did. Savai Mana Krishna Padara Vrindayo. One has to fix the lotus feet of the Lord within his heart. Then he gets the strength to be freed from material entanglement. Maharaj Priyavrata was able to give up his opulent kingdom, and he also gave up the association of his beautiful wife, as if she were a dead body. However beautiful one's wife and however attractive her bodily features, one is no longer interested in her when her body is dead. We praise a beautiful woman for her body, but that same body, when bereft of a spirit soul, is no longer interesting to any lusty man. Maharaj Priyavrata was so strong by the grace of the Lord that even though his beautiful wife was alive, he could give up her association exactly like one who is forced to give up the association of a dead wife. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Nadanam, Najanam, Nasundarim, Kavitam Vajagiri Kamaye, Mahajan Mani, Janmanishware, Bhavatad Bhaktira Haitaki Dvaya. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. For one who desires to advance in spiritual life, attachment to material opulence and attachment to a beautiful wife are two great impediments. Such attachments are condemned even more than suicide. Wow. Therefore, anyone desiring to cross beyond material nations must, by the grace of Krishna, be freed from attachment to woman and money. When Maharaj Priyavrata became completely free from all these attachments, he could again peacefully follow the principles instructed by the great sage Narada. Okay, so this verse, Nadanam Najanam Sundarim Kavitam Vajri Shikamaye Mama Janmani Janmanishware Bhavatad Bhaktira Haituki Tvayi. It's very important. It says, O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire a beautiful woman, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. Well, this is a verse that we should remember and recite regularly. Text 39. There are many famous verses regarding Maharaj Priyavrata's activities. No one but the Supreme Personality of Godhead could do what Maharaj Priyavrata has done. Maharaj Priyavrata dissipated the darkness of night, and with the rims of his great chariot, he excavated 7 oceans. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. There are many excellent verses, famous all over the world, concerning the activities of Maharaja Priyavrata. He is so celebrated that his activities are compared to those of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sometimes a sincere servant and devotee of the Lord is also called Bhagavan. Sri Narada is called Bhagavan, and Lord Shiva and Vyasadeva are also sometimes called Bhagavan. And Lord Shiva and Vyasadeva are also sometimes called Bhagavan. This designation, Bhagavan, is something conferred upon a pure devotee by the grace of the Lord so that he will be highly esteemed. Maharaj Priyavrata was such a devotee. In other words, highly esteemed means very respected for his spiritual advancement. Text 40. Bu samsta tanam kritam yena sarid giri vanadibihi simacha buddha nirbritya tiyai dvipe vibhagasa. To stop the quarreling among different peoples, Maharaj Priyavrata marked boundaries at rivers and at the edges of mountains and forests so that no one would trespass upon another's property. Very important. Purport. The example set by Maharaj Priyavrata in marking off different states is still followed. As indicated here, different classes of men are destined to lie in different areas, and therefore the borders The boundaries of various tracts of land which are described here as islands should be defined by different rivers, forests, and hills. This is also mentioned in relation to Maharaj Prithu, who was born from the dead body of his father by the manipulation of great sages. Maharaja uh, Prithu's father was very sinful, and therefore a black man called Nisada was first born from his dead body. The Nisada race was given a place in the forest because by nature they are thieves and rogues. As animals are given places in various forests and solution, I'm sorry, uh, as animals are given places in various forests and hills, men who are like animals are also destined to live there. One cannot be promoted to civilized life unless one comes to Krishna consciousness. For by nature, one is destined to live in a particular situation according to one's karma and association with the modes of nature. If men want to live in harmony and peace, they must take the Krishna consciousness, for they cannot achieve the highest standard of they cannot take to Krishna consciousness, for they cannot achieve the highest standard while absorbed in the bodily concept of life. Maharaj Priyavata divided the surface of the globe into different islands so that each class of men would live peacefully and not clash with the others. The modern idea of nationhood has gradually developed from the divisions made by Maharaja Priyavata. That's good, nice knowledge. Text 41. As a great follower and devotee of the sage Narada, Maharaj Priyavata considered hellish the opulences he had achieved by dint of fruitive activities and mystic power, whether in the lower or heavenly planetary systems or in human society. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Sri Rupa Goswami has said that the position of a devotee is so super excellent that a devotee does not consider any material opulence worth having. There are different types of opulences on earth, in the heavenly planets, and even in the lower planetary system known as Patala. A devotee, however, knows that they are all material, and consequently, he is not at all interested in them. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Param Dristra Nivartate. Sometimes yogis and jnanis voluntarily give up the material opulences and practice. I'm sorry. Uh, and practice their system of liberation and taste spiritual bliss. However, they frequently fall down because artificial renunciation of material opulences cannot endure. One must have a superior taste in spiritual life. Then he can give up material opulence. Maharaja Priyavata had already tasted spiritual bliss, and therefore he had no interest in any of the material achievements available in the lower, higher, or middle planetary systems. He thus and the Bhaktivedanta purports of the fifth canto, first chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Activities of Maharaja Priya. Chapter 2, The Activities of Maharaja Agnidra. Agnidra. In this chapter, the character of Maharaj Agnitra is described when Maharaj Birata went off for spiritual realization. His son Agnitra became the ruler of Jambu Dvipa in accordance with Maharaj Priyavrata's instructions and maintained its residence with the same affection a father feels for his sons. Once Maharaj Agnidra desired to have a son, and therefore he entered a cave of Mandara mountain to practice austerity. Understanding his desire, Lord Brahma sent a celestial girl named Purvachiti to Agnidra's hermitage. After dressing herself very attractively, she presented herself before him with various feminine movements, and Agnidra was naturally attracted to her. The girl's actions, expressions, smile, sweet words, and moving eyes were fascinating to him. Agnidra was expert in flattery. Thus, he attracted the celestial girl, who was pleased to accept him as her husband because of his mellifluous words. That means very sweet words. She enjoyed royal happiness with Agnitra for many years. I'm sorry. She she enjoyed royal happiness with Agnitra for many years before returning to her abode in the heavenly planets. In her womb, Agnitra begot 9 sons: Nabi, Kimpurusha, Harivarsa, Ilvrata, Samyaka, Hiranmayana, Kuru, Bhadrasva, and Ketumala. He gave them 9 islands with names corresponding to theirs. Agnidra, however, his senses unsatisfied, was always thinking of his celestial wife, and therefore in his next life he was born in her celestial planet. After the death of Agnidra, his 9 sons married 9 daughters of Meru, named Meru Devi, Patirupa, Ugra Damstriti, Lata, Ramya, Shyama, Nari, Bhadra, and Devaviti. Text 1. Sri Sukadeva Goswami said, Sri Sukadeva Goswami continued, after his father, Maharaj Priyabhata, departed to follow the path of spiritual life by undergoing austerities, King Agni Dara completely obeyed his order. Strictly observing the principles of religion, he gave full protection to the inhabitants of Jambudvipa as if they were his own begotten sons. Purport. Following the instructions of his father, Maharaja Birvata, Maharaja Agnidra ruled the inhabitants of Jambudvipa according to religious principles. These principles are exactly contrary to the modern principles of faithfulness. As clearly stated here, the king protected the citizens the way a father protects his begotten children. How he ruled the citizens is also described here. Dharma Vikshamana, strictly according to religious principles. It is the duty of the executive head of state to see that the citizens strictly follow religious principles. The Vedic religious principles begin with Varnashram Dharma, the duty of the four Varnas and four ashramas. Dharma refers to pers- pers- principles given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The first principle of Dharma or religion is to observe the duties of the four orders as enjoined by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. According to people's qualities and activities, society should be divided into Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras. Then again into Brahmana, Grihastas, Vanaprasthas, and Sannyas. These are religious principles, and it is the duty of the head of the state to see that his duty, his religious principles, and it's the duty of the head of the state to see that his citizens strictly follow them. He should not merely act officially. He should be like a father who is always a well-wisher of his sons. Such a father strictly observes whether his sons are performing their duties, and sometimes he also punishes them. Just contrary to the principles mentioned here, the presidents and chief executives in the age of Kali are simply tax collectors who do not care whether religious principles are observed. Indeed, the chief executives of the present day introduce all kinds of sinful activities, especially illicit sex, intoxication, animal killing, and gambling. These sinful activities are now very prominently manifested in India. Although 100 years ago, these four principles of sinful life were strictly prohibited in the families of India, they have now been introduced in every Indian family. Therefore, they cannot follow religious principles. In contrast to the principles of the kings of old, the modern state is concerned only with propaganda for levying taxes and is no longer responsible for the spiritual welfare of the citizens. The state is now called a religion. The state is now callous to religious principles. Srimad Bhagavatam predicts that in Kali Yuga, the government will be entrusted with dasyu karma, which means the occupational duty of uh, rogues and thieves. Modern heads of state are rogues and thieves who plunder the citizens instead of giving them protection. Rogues and thieves plunder without regard for law. But in this age of Kali, as stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, the lawmakers themselves plunder the citizens. The next prediction to be fulfilled, which is already coming to pass, is that of becoming. There's that the next prediction to be fulfilled, which is already coming to pass, is that because of the sinful activities of the citizens and the government, rain will become increasingly scarce. Gradually, there will be complete drought and no production of food grains. People will be reduced to eating flesh and seeds and senses. And many good, spiritually inclined people will have to forsake their homes because they will be too harassed by drought, taxation, and famine. The Krishna consciousness movement is the only hope to save the world from such devastation. It is the most scientific and authorized movement for the actual welfare of the whole human society. Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Text number 2. Desiring to get a perfect son and become an inhabitant of Pitriloka, Maharaj Agnidra once worshipped Lord Brahma, the master of those in charge of material creation. And he went to a valley of Mandara Hill, where the damsels of the heavenly planets come down to stroll. There he collected garden flowers and other necessary propaganda, and then engaged in severe austerities and worship. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The king became Pitriloka Kama, or desirous of being transferred to the planet named Pitriloka. Pitriloka is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, Yanti Deva Ratan Devan, Pitrin Yanti Pinchuvrata. To go to this planet, one needs very good sons who can make offerings to Lord Vishnu. Then, uh, and then offer the remnants to their forefathers. 1 second, okay. And then, so the purpose of the Shraddha ceremony is to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, so that after pleasing him, one may offer prasada to one's forefathers, and in this way make them happy. The inhabitants of Pitriloka are generally men of the karma kanya, or fruitive activities category, who have been transferred there because of their pious activities. They can stay there as long as their descendants offer them Vishnu Prasada. Everyone in heavenly planets, such as Pitriloka, however, must return to Earth after exhausting the effects of his pious acts. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 9:21, Shine Punye Martya Lokam Vishanti. Persons who perform pious acts are transferred to higher planets, but when the effects of their pious acts are over, they are again transferred to Earth. Since Maharaj Priyavrata was a great devotee, how could he have begotten and how could he have begotten a son who desired to be transferred to Pitriloka? Lord Krishna says, Pitrin Yanti Pritrivrata. Persons who desire to go to Pritriloka are transferred there. Similarly, Yanti Mad Yajino Pimam. Persons who desire to be transferred to the spiritual planets, like Kuntalokas, can also go there. Since Maharaj Agnidra was the son of a Vaishnava, he should have desired to be transferred to the spiritual world by Kuntaloka. Why then did he desire to be transferred to Pitriloka? In answer to this, Goswami Giridhara, one of the Bhagavatam commentators, remarked that Agnidra was born when Maharaj Pritivrata was infatuated by lusty desires. This may be accepted as a fact because sons are begotten with different mentalities according to the time of their conception. According to the Vedic system, therefore, before a child is conceived, the Garbhodana Samskara is performed. This ceremony molds the mentality of the father in such a way that when he plants his seed in the womb of his wife, he will beget a child whose mind will be completely saturated with a devotional attitude. At the present moment, however, there are no such Garbhodana samskaras, and therefore people generally have a lusty attitude when they beget children. Especially in this age of Kali, there are no Garbhodana ceremonies. Everyone enjoying sex with his wife like a cat or a dog. Therefore, according to Shastric injunctions, almost all the people of the high age belong to the Sudra category. Of course, although Maharaj Angnidra had a desire to be transferred to Pitraloka, this does not mean that his ment, uh, mentality was that of a Sudra. He was a Kshatriya. Maharaj Agnidra desired to be transferred to Pitraloka, and therefore he needed a wife because anyone desiring to be transferred to Pitraloka must leave behind a good son to offer yearly pinda or prashada from Lord Vishnu. To have a good son, Maharaj I'm sorry, Maharaj Agnidra wanted a wife from a family of demigods. Therefore, he went to Mandara Hill, where the women of the demigods generally come to worship Lord Brahma. In Bhagavad Gita 4.12, it is said, Kanksam tat karmana siddhim yajanta iha devata. Materialists who want quick results in the material world worship demigods. This is also confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam, Sri Aishwarya Prajet Dava. Those who desire beautiful wives, substantial wealth, and many sons worship the demigods. But an intelligent devotee, instead of being entangled by the happiness of this material world in the form of in the form of a beautiful wife, material opulence, and children, desires to be immediately transferred back home, back to Godhead. Thus, he worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There we are, right on the button, 7:30. Uh, so we'll stop right there. And our takeaway from today is the following. Shri Aishwarya Praje Sava. Those who desire beautiful wives, substantial wealth, and many sons worship the demigod. But an intelligent devotee, instead of being entangled by the happiness of this material world in the form of a beautiful wife, material opulence, and children. Nice. No. Okay, let's start over. Sri Aishwarya Prajaps Sava. Those who desire beautiful wives, substantial wealth, and many sons worship the demigods. But an intelligent devotee, instead of being entangled by the happiness of this material world in the form of a beautiful wife, material opulence, and children, desires to be immediately transferred back home, back to Godhead. Thus, he worshipped the Supreme. He worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, Haribol. And text 3, understanding King Agnidra's desire, the first and most powerful created being of this universe, Lord Brahma, selected the best of the dancing girls in his assembly, whose name was Purvachiti, and sent her to the king. Oh, that's a nice gift. Or maybe it's not a nice gift. Let's see. In this verse, the words Bhagavan Adi Purusha are significant. Lord Krishna is the original person. In Bhagavad Gita, he is also addressed by Arjuna as Purusham Adyam, the original person, and he is called Bhagavan. In this verse, however, we see that Lord Brahma is described as Bhagavan Adi Purusha. The reason he is called Bhagavan is that he fully represents the Supreme Personality Godhead and is the firstborn creature in this universe. Lord Brahma could understand Maharaj Krishna.
Maharaj,
Huh?
okay. You're
What's that?
you're reading some of the words, Slippy, so just one.
The reason he is called Bhagavan is that he fully represents the Supreme Personality Godhead and is the firstborn creature in this universe. Lord Brahma could understand Maharaj Agnidra's desire because he is as powerful as Lord Vishnu. As Lord Vishnu, situated in Paramatma, can understand the desire of the living entity, so Lord Brahma can also understand the living entity's desire. For Vishnu, as a via medium, informs him. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.1, Tene Brahma Hridaya Adhika Vaye. Lord Vishnu informs Lord Brahma of everything from within his heart. Because Maharaj Agnidra specifically worshipped Lord Brahma, Lord Brahma was pleased and he sent Purvachiti, the Apsara, to satisfy him. Okay. Thank you very much, my dear devotees. Let's see. Are there any questions? Any questions about what we have read today? You can see. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say, any questions online?
You can see and understand by these purports that the real issue of human life is to not be attracted by the.
Yeah,
Okay,
sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, yes, Maharaj. I had the question I had was, the Maharaj Priyamvrata, Priyavrata. So
Yeah.
it says in the text that he was known all over the world, and uh, or he's known all over the world for his. So, but we haven't heard of him, like, growing up in India or whatever. We. So is it just the fact that he's just a in the Bhagavatam? It's like, kind of highlighted, or is it, because I mean, compared to like Ram, Lakshman, or those kinds of figures?
What is your questioning?
So,
So my
go
my
ahead.
question is, yeah, go ahead, sir. Sorry.
No, I'm just rephrasing what Prabhuji is asking.
Go
This
ahead.
is like Priyavrata, according to Srila Prabhupada, is claimed to be world well known, but we growing up we never heard of Priyavrata. So that's Prabhuji's question.
Yes, thank you.
Well, that's because
The education
the
system.
education system is all what was and still is giving you the history of the Muslims, not of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. You hear about all the Muslim kings who invaded India and their, let's say, very, very low class history and low class behavior. So
Okay.
that's the problem. You're not hearing about Srimad Bhagavatam in all the uh, uh, schools. You're hearing about all the Muslim kings that have ruined or tried to ruin Vedic culture. Is that
Okay.
right?
Right. But I mean, not we had heard of Prahlad Maharaj, like growing up. We have heard of Dhruv Maharaj. I mean, we never heard of Priyavrata. Just so that was my question. But maybe he's uh, maybe not as emphasized in society or whatever as in India. It's all right.
But
Thank you,
says
man.
our takeaway is since Maharaj Priyavata was a great devotee, how could he have begotten a son who desired to be transferred to Pitriloka? Lord Krishna says, Pitrin Yanti Pitrivata. Persons who desire to go to Pitriloka are transferred there. Similarly, Yanti Mad Yajeno Pimam. Persons who desire to be transferred to the spiritual planets, like Kuntalokas, can also go there. Since Maharaj Agnitra was the son of a Vaishnava, he should have desired to be transferred to the spiritual world by Kuntaloka. Why then did he desire to be transferred to Pitriloka? In answer to this, Goswami Giridhara, one of the Bhagavatam commentators, remarks that Agnidra was born when Maharaj Priyavrata was infatuated by lusty desires. This may be accepted as a fact because sons are begotten with different mentalities according to the time of their conception. According to the Vedic system, therefore, before a child is conceived, the Garbhodana Samskara is performed. This ceremony molds the mentality of the father in such a way that when he plants his seed in the womb of his wife, he will beget a child whose mind will be completely saturated with a devotional attitude. At the present moment, however, there are no such Garbhodana samskaras, and therefore people generally have a lusty attitude when they beget children. Especially in this age of Kali, there are no Garbhodana ceremonies. Everyone enjoys sex with his wife like a cat or dog. Therefore, according to Shastric injunctions, almost all the people of this age belong to the Sudra category. Of course, although Maharaj Agnidra had a desire to be transferred to Pitriloka, this does not mean that his mentality was that of a Sudra. He was a Kshatriya. Maharaj Agnidra desired to be transferred to Pitriloka, and therefore he needed a wife because anyone desiring to be transferred to Pitriloka must leave behind a good son to offer yearly pinda or prasada from Lord Vishnu. To have a good son, Maharaj Agnidra wanted a wife from a family of devotees, from a family of demigods. Therefore, he went to Mandara Hill, where the women of the demigods generally come, to worship Lord Brahma. In Bhagavad Gita 4:12, it is said, Kanksanta karmana siddhim yajanta ihadevata. Materialists who want quick results in the material world worship demigods. This is also confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam. Shri Aishwarya Praja Sabha. Those who desire beautiful wives, substantial wealth, and many sons worship the demigods. But an intelligent devotee, instead of being entangled by the happiness of this material world in the form of a beautiful wife, material opulence, and children, desires to be immediately transferred back home, back to Godhead. Thus, he worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu. Okay, so this is explaining why so many people are enamored by mundane life and not really engaged in serious devotional service. They're still under the, uh, let's say, control of beautiful so-called women. And because of that, they miss the opportunity of uh, becoming qualified to go back to Godhead. So they stay in the cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease without any possibility of getting out of it. That's why there are Vaishnavas who are able to give proper instruction, proper education to uh, young men and women who are interested in becoming liberated from the cycle of birth and death. But the number of people that are really serious about that is very less at this time, which is the worst time to be Krishna conscious. Most children are educated to become Sudras, to eat, sleep, mate, and defend for sustained uh, material existence. This is the problem that's going on today. Even our own children, you can ask them, so what do you want to do in life? Most of the time they say, well, I want to have a nice house, nice car, and make money, work in Microsoft, and so forth. And that's the way they talk. That means that they haven't been educated properly. Even the sons and daughters of devotees oftentimes are not really uh, dedicated to having a complete spiritual life. That just means that the parents have not been able to maintain the principles of Krishna consciousness in a what we call uh, uh, in a substantive way that influences the child. The child being sent to mundane schools where the teachers are not devotees, where the curriculum is not spiritual, are getting contaminated. And but the family members, in other words, the father and mother, are putting their child in schools like that. That is a big mistake. It's better to and educate the children at home, and so that they are not introduced to the mundane philosophy of eat, sleep, mate, and defend. There has to be the ability of performing tapasya, and what we're reading is about uh, devotees who engage in tapasya and achieve great uh, pinnacles of devotional activity. So that type of tapasya is necessary if you want to have children who grow up and engage in uh, spiritual activities. If they're not trained in tapasya, as they grow up, they'll eventually go farther and farther away from Krishna consciousness and become more and more entangled in material life or mundane material life, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Okay, are there any questions? I actually, it's a very important point to discuss. And uh, why? Because we don't want our children to grow up and be Vishayis, sense gratifiers. We want them to grow up and be devotees. But to do that, you can't put them in school, in mundane schools with mundane teachers and mundane, uh, let's say, children who are not interested in Krishna consciousness. They will eventually become contaminated by that bad association. And it's better not to be highly educated because most of that high education just teaches one to become a sense gratifier. It's better to be more humble. You don't have to have big cars, big houses, and big stool.
Correct.
It's better to have modest houses, modest cars, and modest living as a devotee. But that seems to be considered a failure in the material world. But actually, it's not. It leads to a peaceful life where you're not overwhelmed by sense gratification. Okay, I think we'll stop right there. Any questions, comments? Our takeaway for today. In Bhagavad Gita 4.12, it is said, Kangsam tat karmana siddhim yajanta iha devata. Materialists who want quick results in the material world worship demigods. This is also confirmed in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Shri Aishwarya Prajasava. Those who desire beautiful wives, substantial wealth, and many sons worship the demigods. But an intelligent devotee, instead of being entangled by the happiness of this material world in the form of a beautiful wife, material opulence, and children, desires to be immediately transferred back home, back to Godhead. Thus, he worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu. That should make us think very seriously. What is the real purpose of human life? Is it to become attracted by material opulence and children and beautiful wife and live a life of sense gratification all the time, seeming to be engaged in some devotional activity, but the real purpose is substantial wealth and many sons, and actually, instead of worshiping Krishna, worshiping the demigods. But an intelligent devotee, instead of being entangled by the happiness of this material world in the form of a beautiful wife, material opulence, and children, desires to be immediately transferred back to the adopted God. Thus, he worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu. Yeah, you see, it's not easy to be Krishna conscious in Kali Yuga. There are so many ways of being trapped by Maya in Kali Yuga. And those different ways are attractive women, attractive cars, attractive houses, attractive, in other words, vacations, attractive this, attractive that. Therefore, it weakens uh, the culture of Krishna consciousness. Therefore, children, although born in good families, are sidetracked by the bad association they get in schools. And eventually, they lose their determination to have a spiritual life and they surrender to material life. And Prabhupada has said that schools today, modern schools, are slaughterhouses. You put your child in a modern school today, and the child gets slaughtered by mundane education to become a Sudra who just works for some company, makes some money, and engages in very difficult activities that make it almost impossible to have time to be Krishna conscious. They're so worried about maintaining their work that they have lesser time or no time for Krishna consciousness. That's our situation today. Okay, so our takeaway for today. Sri Aishwarya Projectstava. Those who desire beautiful wives, substantial wealth, and many sons worship the demigod. But an intelligent devotee, instead of being entangled by the happiness of this material world in the form of a beautiful wife, material opulence, and children, desires to be immediately transferred back home, back to Godhead. Thus, he worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu. Yeah, what's wrong with that? And that means the child grows up to be successful in going back to Godhead rather than being successful and working in Microsoft and making the barons of Microsoft rich and learning how to eat meat and engage in sex and party and be a Vishai, a sense gratifier. If you have spent your whole life working in Microsoft or any other company, will you be able to remember Krishna at the end of life? Probably not. It is possible, but if you're in the right association. But for most people, the answer is no. Because you will think of your 401k at the moment of death, you'll think of all the plans you have to make more money. Yeah, oftentimes when someone is on the verge of death, he'll pray to God or pray to somebody, please give me a couple of more years. I haven't finished all my desires. Although they're like, 80 years old. They had 80 years to perform all their desires. But still, they say, oh, so I still have to do this and I still have to do that. That's very, very sad. Okay, my dear devotees, we'll stop right there. Our takeaway today, Sri Aishvarya Prajatsava. Those who desire beautiful wives, substantial wealth, and many sons worship the demigods, but an intelligent devotee, instead of being entangled by the happiness of this material world in the form of a beautiful wife, material opulence, and children, desires to be immediately transferred back home, back to Godhead. Thus, he worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu. That is our takeaway for today. The complete opposite of what is going on today. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Actually, one of the best ways to forget Krishna is to go to a festival where there's a lot of people, and their real, let's say, end of pleasure is firecrackers. What do you learn by watching firecrackers go on? No matter how, you know, profound, not profound, but no matter how, powerful the crackers are, it doesn't really help you understand anything, right? You just see a bunch of light and being exploded in the sky, and you don't learn anything. You don't become more pure in your in your life. That's why I stopped going to the firecrackers at the end of the program. But people just sit there and watch the firecrackers, right? And it actually makes your mind dull because the firecracker does not have any spiritual knowledge to give you. It's just that you hear some noise and you see some light, and there's no real Krishna consciousness involved. Right? Now, if everyone was chanting Hare Krishna while the firecrackers are going off, then maybe there is some benefit. But no, you go at the end of the day, and the firecrackers are lighted and they crackle off, and you just sit there like a dummy and listen to it and see it. And there's absolutely zero Krishna consciousness involved. Okay, so you don't want to be what you would call a person with a uh, dead uh, uh, dead mind. Why watching firecrackers go off, hearing the firecrackers, seeing the firecrackers is one way of making your mind dull and getting your mind away from Krishna. And then when you see the really big firecrackers go off, you say, ooh, you know. Well, that was the big one, yeah, big nonsense, Okay, thank you very much, my dear devotees. Please chant Hare Krishna and be happy. And don't be attracted by firecrackers.